Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I rank and give short reviews of the last 10 new to me games that I have played. Now before I get started on these 10 games plus an extra, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Before I get into the 10 games, I want to give a quick mention to an Exit game that we played recently. This was Exit the Haunted Roller Coaster. Been quite some time since I played an Exit game because admittedly I did get a little bit fatigued with them. But this was, I was in the right mood, it was the right place at the right time. We had one of these lying around, and you know what? I actually quite enjoyed this one. It wasn't too easy, it wasn't too difficult either. We did pretty well, and some of the puzzles were quite interesting. So out of all the ones that I played, I think this was probably one of the better ones. So I like that one. That was Exit the Haunted Roller Coaster. But let's get into the 10 games now. So at number 10, I have the Seals of Cthulhu. So this one is a strange two-player only game with some bidding and some bluffing, and what you're essentially doing is that you're playing a card from your hand face down and then putting your kind of wager on it to see, you know what, I'm willing to pay this much to take this card, and then your opponent can either take your offer or they can up the bid, where the decision will be reversed, and then you can either take their offer or up the bid again. And it keeps going until someone's outbid the other person, and then they'll take all the currency, and then the other person will take the actual card to put in their tableau. Now these cards have different uses. So number one is the actual victory points. Number two is the influence they're worth, because you can actually use previously earned cards in order to buy future cards. And the third use is that if you get two halves of the same book type or the card type, then you will get given a particular ability, which will allow you to kind of flip cards over and stuff to hurt your opponent, and even like flip your cards back over if they've hurt you, that kind of thing. Now, the game mechanically was actually pretty interesting, and I think there's a lot of potential here. Now, my issue with it was that the game didn't really kick into gear until it was nearly over. So it's only a 5-round game, and by the time you end up getting, a couple of those cards of the same type, it's normally the 4th or 5th round. So you didn't really get enough time to trigger them, and that flipping ability or part of the game didn't really come into play at all. So it was a strange one. We were kind of struggling to find where the game was, and it came down to kind of a micro decision of who had the most points compared to their opponent. But that key mechanism of that back and forth bidding worked really, really well. Yeah, all in all, I think the execution was a little bit lackluster, and again, we were just struggling to find where the game was. We even read the rulebook again to make sure we were playing it correctly, and we were. So almost a kind of a non-starter with this one. Maybe I'm missing something, and I think it's probably going to get better if you really invested in this game and kept on playing with the same player, so that those nuances start to build. But with so many great two-player games out there, I'm not quite sure I'm prepared to do that. So that is the Seals of Cthulhu at number 10. At number 9, I have Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. Now this is almost like a game of Snap, but instead of playing cards and trying to match them, whenever you play a card, you are going to say those words in order, and if what you've said matches the card you've played, then it's going to be the first person to put their hand down, and or the last person is going to get those cards, and the idea is to try and shed your cards. There are also some bonus cards as well, which add some silliness into the mix, such as these like narwhals and things where you have to make like gestures with your hands before slapping your hand down. So complete nonsense. Gameplay mechanically it's absolutely terrible, but you cannot help but have fun with this one. We only played it the once. I had a relatively good time with doing so because it was so silly and wacky. Obviously nothing I'm going to sing from the rooftops about, because it is what it is really, but it brought a smile to our faces, so therefore it had to get some credit. So that is Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. At number 8, I have Dr. Panic. This is another family weight style game, definitely more aimed towards kids, but is a real-time game where you are trying to complete all these little activities in your group. which all represent some kind of medical procedure. So for example, you have to put the kind of ECG wires together, or you have to represent the kind of stitching going through this thing in the right order, those kind of things. So again, complete silliness. But that mixed with the pressure of the counter going, or the timer running down, and on top of that, the app is throwing in these extra things to really throw you off track. So for example, we had one that said, you need to stop what you're doing, you need to get everybody into the toilet and close the door, and once you've done that, you can open the door again and come out and carry on with your activity. So again, complete silliness, but again, it was so wacky and so frantic that you cannot help but have a good time. So, and Dr. Panic, definitely an event style game, probably play it once or twice a year, but if you are in the right mood and have the right group with you, then it's going to guarantee some laughs. So that is Dr. Panic at number 8. At number 7, I have Lutes. Now this is a set collection and bidding style game where you are bidding simultaneously with your opponents to put a claim on these different cards, which will score you your points. Money is quite tight in this game, so every so often you have to kind of bypass actually spending money in order to collect more money, which means that you cannot take a card that round. And it's kind of balancing those things. Now, I do like this idea of potentially having some crossover with what you and your opponents want, so therefore you can bolster your bids before you reveal them in order to hopefully get or beat your opponent and then get what you want. But of course, you do not exactly know what your opponents want, so therefore you might have wasted some currency in order to secure that particular card that no one else wanted anyway. It's pretty standard stuff. This is kind of a run-of-the-mill set collection and bidding style game, but it is fairly clean, it's unconvoluted, there's no fiddly rules. It kind of reminds me a bit of Nidavellir, but nowhere near as refined or polished. But at the same time, it's a bit more stripped back than a game like that. So I'm not quite sure in 2024 if there is that kind of a market for this game. It feels like there's so many other games that did what this does, but a lot better. But at the same time, it doesn't exactly do anything bad either. It just is what it is. It's a solid, 5, 5.5, 6 out of 10 bidding style game. So that is Lutes at number 7. At number 6, I have Merchant's Quest. Now, this is an upcoming Kickstarter game that will be releasing later in May. And this is a weird one because it's kind of a bridge between more traditional roll and move style games with some Euro mechanisms put on top of it. So essentially what you're doing is you're rolling a die and then you're moving your wagon from one side of the board to the other, revealing tiles as you go. These tiles can be just completely empty tiles that let you carry on. They can be picking up more quests. They can be visiting these villages to buy goods. And then you're going to continue through the map and hopefully sell those goods for a profit because certain villages offer you more money than what you paid for them in the first place. At the same time, you have to move through this mountain range, which can be problematic because things are popping up that you can't move through. And all as you go on, the map is getting revealed more and more when your opponents can start kind of piggybacking on your efforts to use the trade routes that you've already established. I think this game works so well because of that roll and move mechanism mixed with the round timer, because you want to be making sure you're leaving yourself enough time to get everything done because you are incentivized to take goods to the castle right on the other side of the board to sell them for their maximum profits. But of course you want to make as much money as you can before you get to that point, because once you're at the castle, you can never come back. So yeah, this one, again, on paper, it probably shouldn't work as well as it does, but it just knows what it's trying to do and it doesn't pretend to be something it's not. It just oozes charm, and I enjoyed it a lot. And so did everybody else I played with, actually. We all kind of left this game with a big smile on my face because it was just so charming. So if this one interests you, I probably will be releasing a review soon if I haven't done so already. So keep an eye out for that one. So that is Merchant's Quest at number 6. At number 5, I have Matches. Now this is a quirky card game with some hand management mechanisms going on and a degree of bluffing and wagering as well, because there's kind of two main ways that you're going to score points in this game. And number 1 is to pass from the round and score points based on pairs of cards that you've played in front of you. But the second one is to be the last man standing and end up taking a bunch of points that are built up on this kind of bonfire. But the cards you're playing may be adding more gems onto the bonfire, making it more lucrative and more inviting to the other players. So it's all about knowing when to boost that bonfire, or knowing when it's not going to be advantageous to do so and back out of the round early to stop the lasting player to collect more points. It's a very slight game. I don't think there's a lot of decision space, but the decisions you're making do matter in the end. And there's just something about it that just works, and it feels a little bit different and just a little bit strange. So I'm liking this one. I'm not sure if it's going to be up there with the great card games, but it's going to kind of raise an eyebrow to, I think, there's something a little bit different about this game, and I do really like that. Again, that wagering of, how can I manage this hand to stay in this round as long as I can to make sure I'm the last man standing to claim all those riches that are built up through all the other players' efforts as well. So that is matches at number 5. At number 4, I have another 2-player only game with Yokai Sketch. Now this is a tug-of-war style game, another card-driven game, as you are playing these double-sided cards from your hand and putting them against these matching scoring piles of cards. Those scoring cards are kind of shuffled into a deck and vary in points, so some of them are going to be worth as little as 3 points, some are worth as much as 7 points, but in order for that card to be distributed to the winning player, you and your opponent need to have contributed that amount of cards. So, for example, if I had 4 cards next to that scoring card and my opponent had 3, it'll be 7, therefore that 7 card will go to the winning player. But the winning player will remove their bid cards out of the mix, but the losing players will stay there ready for the next card to come round. So it was all about pacing yourself. Now there's also some additional kind of wrinkles and little tricks you can pull off in this game, because some of these cards allow you to mess with the decks and what points are distributed, and some of them will even force your opponent to flip their card round and allocate that previously played card on the opposite side of that card. So again, lots of little tricks and little things you can do to manipulate the board state to your benefit. It feels more like a traditional game. It almost feels like KIENDA in the way that it works. Super smooth and pretty clever, moves at a brisk pace, and comes in a tiny box as well. So these little card games work for me, and mechanically there's nothing spectacular about it, but there's also nothing I can really criticise either, because again, it just works and it does what it does pretty damn well. So that is Yokai Sketch at number 4. Okay, so let's get into the top 3 games now, and this is where my commendations begin. And to be honest, you could have put these 3 games in any order and I would have been happy. So I definitely did find it difficult to put these in the positions of 3, 2 and 1. Again, it could have fallen either way. So at number 3, I have The Lost Code. So this is a reprint of Think Straight, which is an older deduction style game. Of course, I think mechanically is exactly the same, but it's got a whole new fresh lick of paint on it. So this one, you are trying to find the numbers that are facing away from you that your opponents can see, but you can see all their numbers. We've seen that kind of thing before in deduction games, but what I really love about this game is the actual the way that you're getting points, because you are using these series of these different dials which will try to help you, what you'll use to guess the combined value of the different symbols of these tiles. So each round you're going to roll some dice, and then that's going to ask you, what is the total value of those symbols added up. And then you've got a series of these different dials. Some of them will have a wide range, some will have a very narrow range, and basically you're trying to guess the range of numbers that those dice could add up to. So again, if you're certain on what it is, you can go for that one particular number and get a whole bunch of points, or if you're not so certain, then you can go a wider range, get a fewer points, but maybe get some information out of that. Now, something that this game had really kind of messed with me is because your information that you have in front of you does change throughout the game, and you need to get that into your head when you go into this one, because I've made some pretty costly mistakes. So yeah, everything's always in flux, at least if you're making mistakes in this one, and that's something you need to kind of drill into your brain. But all in all, I love that gear system. I think it's so clever. It's really clean design. You simply roll the dice, guess your number, and score points. Simple as that. I think a lot of deduction games try a little bit too hard to be different and end up kind of steering away from the actual deduction part too much, whereas my favourite deduction games seem to focus on just that, you know, the deduction itself. And this one is definitely up there with my favourite deduction games that I've played. Again, it could have been number 2 or 1 on this list, because, you know what, I'm still kind of exposing myself to this one, trying to learn about it, and I really am itching to get it back to the table. So that is The Lost Code at number 3. At number 2, I have Peblo, which is the second of the Mojito Studios games, the first of which being The Lost Code. Now, this is a reprint of Peblo from over 20 years ago now. You know, I've wanted this game forever, but it's been like hen's teeth to get a copy of. But this is a Kramer and Kiesling design that's, I think, completely unique to anything else I have in my collection. You are essentially stacking these blocks on top of each other and around each other, but trying to conceal your own colour amongst the other blocks, because each turn there's going to be this piece that circles the board, and depending on where it lands and what it can see, the players are going to get points, and points in this game are a bad thing, so you want to hide your pieces as much as you can. Sometimes you might want to, you know, put your blocks where other players are, so that if you're going to take a hit, they're also going to take a hit. And at the same time, you are not only hiding your blocks from the kind of a side view, when this piece hits the corners, you have to be making sure that you are covering your pieces from a bird's eye view as well. So definitely a literal multi-dimensional style game. Highly distinct to anything else I've ever had in my collection. I really enjoyed it. It gets pretty competitive, it gets pretty brain-burning at times as you try to map the timings out and where players are likely to go, leaving yourself enough time to cover up your exposed pieces. And you know what, this game is so much fun, and again, very interesting. You know, it's quite difficult now to find unique games. This game is certainly that. So that is Peblo at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Evergreen. So Evergreen is the somewhat re-implementation of photosynthesis that did really well quite a few years ago now. However, in this one, unlike photosynthesis, you are not sharing a board with the other players. This one, you have your own little forest where you are trying to efficiently grow your trees from little twigs into big ones, and try to absorb these light points as the sun moves around the board and your trees capture them. Bigger trees will cause shadows, which will hide other trees, and so on. So it's all about trying to map out as efficiently as you can to get as much light as you can at the end of every round. The way you actually take your turns in this one is that you're using this card drafting system, which will show you which location or what part of the map you can actually build on. But it also has a little sub-action on it where you can do different things as well, which aren't location specific. But the actions themselves are very simple. You know, put new trees on the board, sprout smaller trees into bigger trees, or those medium trees to the bigger trees again, and so on. But there's a little twist in this game which kind of conflict with each other. You know, that idea of getting the most light points, but at the same time getting points based on your grouped trees. Or there's even this additional touch where the card left behind that was not drafted by the players will go into the scoring pool, which means that those particular cards or that type of landscape will grant you points based on the big trees in it at the end of the game. And they can really ramp up, so it's something that cannot be ignored. And those 3 conflicting scoring mechanisms kind of butt heads with each other, and it makes it a very interesting game in terms of the decision space. So a joyful play. It's very relaxing, I find. It's just a nice game. So that is Evergreen at number 1. So there we have it. That concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it and discovered a new game or 2 on the list. Now, if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.